Right.
I have never found a morel on my own either. I have some friends who have found them and they've been nice enough to share them with me, but I have never found one on my own. They're very prized mushrooms. These are, oh, that's awesome. I see Eliana said, my mom and I picked stinging nettle yesterday and we made tea. I'm drinking it right now. You have it in your backyard. Cool, that's awesome. I have it in my backyard too, but that's because I planted it there. I'm hoping that I can have a bunch of it in the future. And Liv said, did Zia eat any of the pesto? And that, yeah, she did, and she loved it. I feed her anything that she can swallow because she only has 2 teeth on the bottom, so it has to be kind of like squishy, like baby food. But she did love it. It was good. So the mushroom that I want to talk about today, I'm going to pull up our whiteboard for a second, and please do not write on it yet. Maybe at the end we can do a little bit like we did yesterday, since you figured out that really great way of co-editing. So the mushroom today is called, I'm going to do the Latin name first. So Latin name is Stropharia rugosoannulata. It's a crazy long name. And it is commonly known as King Stropharia, godzilla mushroom, Winecap mushroom, and garden giant mushroom. So it has a bunch of different names that people call it. It's very popular among gardeners, perennial gardeners like me, people who like to grow things that are going to come back year after year. So Stropharia, or the winecap mushroom, which I usually call it, is a perennial mushroom, essentially. And it's a perennial mushroom if it continues to have food, just like plants, right? So you need to be able to continue feeding it so that it can stay alive. And I want to show you a picture of what I mean when I'm talking about keeping it alive. The main part of the organism is actually not the mushroom itself, not the thing that we see, which you haven't even seen yet, but the main part of the organism actually looks mostly like this. There you go. So I need to pull, there you go. I needed to be able to see you. So before we talk about what this is, I want people to tell me what they think it looks like. Liv, what's it look like?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I think it's mycelium.
Mm-hmm. It is mycelium. What?
And
yeah.
it looks like a big web, a mess of stuff. And it kind of looks like our nervous system.
Yeah.
And yeah, just a bunch of threads.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Those are great words, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, what we mean by all of that. And Baron, you have your hand up. What does it look like?
It looks like veins, kind of, and
sure. Roots. And roots. Sure. Yeah, yeah. Elijah.
Mold.
Looks a little bit like mold. Yeah, sure. Exactly. Jaden, what's it look like?
I kind of think it looks like, yeah, moldy. Mm-hmm. What's that called? Stuff that monarch butterflies eat.
Oh, milkweed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Milkweed. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Sure. So, let's see. There's something in the chat here too. Yeah, exactly. Liv said it's like the internet for trees. And that is true. So oops, I lost the picture here. So this is a picture of mycelium, which I will put in our whiteboard so you can see exactly what, how to spell that. Mycelium is the main fungal organism of that produces mushrooms. And mushrooms, like the things that we eat and the things that we see in the forest and growing out of trees, mushrooms are just fruits. So they're fruits like apples are fruits on a tree. So mycelium is essentially like the entire tree, and mushrooms are just the fruit on that whole tree. So when we're talking about mushrooms, more than anything, we are talking about this mycelium stuff. And this is all the stuff that's underground, or the stuff that's growing inside trees. It like takes over this entire space in the ground, or in wood chips, or in dead trees, or in diseased, like dying trees. This is the part that takes up the most space. And when a bunch of these little tiny threads, or these little like web-like things, they're called filaments, or hyphae. Hyphae is the word, the scientific word for all of these little individual tiny little strings. These little strings reach out for other strings that are all part of the same organism, and once they meet in the middle, they fuse together. As you can see here, they're all reaching out, joining each other underground. And once they do that, they take over this whole space, and they trigger this ability they trigger the ability, once they take up a certain amount of space, to produce mushrooms. And they produce mushrooms. I'm going to show you what finally, I'm going to show you what the Stropharia mushroom looks like. There it is. So these little guys here they're not very big actually in comparison to the way that Stropharia can get, but these are the first Stropharia mushrooms that I ever found, and I thought they were so adorable that I took a picture of them, and I love showing them because they're just like two little friend mushrooms that popped out of the ground in one of my friend's gardens a few years ago when I first started learning about them. So you can see they have this wine colored cap, this like kind of dark red-ish colored cap, and a kind of like tannish yellow off-white stem. So when the mycelium in this whole like wood chip, this whole mulched garden area where these mushrooms came out of, the entire ground underneath this whole area is taken over by mycelium. We have some things in the chat here. Are they edible? Yes, they are edible, and that's why I really wanted to talk to you about them. They're considered a choice edible. They're considered like delicious mushrooms. So they're fairly easy to grow in a garden, in a perennial garden, like the kind of garden that I grow, where I grow trees and I grow berry bushes and I grow those herbaceous perennials, lots of perennials that things that come back year after year after year. Oh, sorry, it looks like my internet isn't working super well. Let's try this one. They come back year after year. They provide shade and a really, really great ecosystem for these garden giant, these Winecap mushrooms. So does anybody who knows a little bit about mushrooms know how they eat things? Anything about like how much? Sorry, guys. My internet just stopped working for a second. Sorry about that. I'm going to go to Ileana here. Can you tell me about how mushrooms eat?
I'm just giving a guess. Do they eat like through their roots, maybe?
Yeah, so well they do. They eat through, so that mycelium is kind of like their roots. So that's one of the things that they do. They eat with that mycelium. Let's see what other people say. Baron.
So they kind of will like grow on things and then almost decay them with their mycelium.
Sure. Yeah, they are decomposers. They help to decay things after things die. They help to break them down. Jaden, what's your answer?
It wasn't really an answer. It just, the problem was that you just started recording.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, great.
Let's see. So, a little bit about how mushrooms eat is, and what makes them so special and so important, this mycelium in our world, is that they help to decay, they help to decompose dead material, things that other creatures can't break down. So humans can't break this stuff down, insects can't break this stuff down, fungus of all kinds helps to break down things to make them edible for other creatures to then kind of finish the job. So if we didn't have mushrooms, or if we didn't have fungus, I should say, we wouldn't be able to, we would be covered in like dead trees and decaying leaves and all of the stuff that is like in our woods that makes our healthy soil to garden in would never decompose. It would never break down, and we would be buried by all of that stuff, which is crazy to think about. They fill a crucial, very, very important role in our entire world. Especially those of us who live in places that are like forests or that have a lot of woods around them. So they can, I'm not sure if you guys can all see me. I'm having some internet issues, it seems like. If you could like raise your hands or chat, like type yes or no in the chat if you can hear me or see me, what's going on. Having some issues. Okay. Cool. My internet is very slow for some reason right now. The type, I'm going to bring up the whiteboard again to type some words out for you guys to see. Oh, we lost all our stuff. So there's a woody material in trees that is called lignin, and lignin is primarily what things like Stropharia and lots of other mushroom fungi break down. And they consume lignin, which is like the woody material in all of our trees and all of our shrubs and our berry bushes and things like that, that nothing else can break down. So and they do that by basically like so the word is exuding. They basically like throw up these particular compounds that will decompose the material, and then they can kind of like take it back into itself. So they have this crazy way of eating that no other creatures on this planet can eat. And that's why they're so important to our ecosystems. they're in our garden environments, the way that I grow them is through putting down a bunch of wood chips, and then I'm going to pull up another picture here. So this is a picture of these in my garden. I'll show you this picture first. So these are little Stropharia mushrooms that I pulled out of my garden the first year that I had them. And you can see behind my hand here, all of these wood chips. So this was a vacant lot, an empty lot in Philadelphia that I turned into a garden. And it started off just like kind of gross, like almost looking like baseball dirt. If you can envision what that, like that kind of orange construction fill. And I just got wood chips from arborists in Philadelphia, people who were doing street tree work or taking down trees throughout Philly. I made friends with them, and I asked them if they would give me all their wood chips. So they would come with their big trucks full of wood chips from after when they cut down trees, and they would dump them on my sidewalk, and I would just fill this lot. I filled this lot like multiple times, multiple layers with wood chips. And then I put this, the mycelium, I got a little bit of this mycelium from friends of mine who are mushroom farmers, and I spread it all throughout the whole yard where the wood chips were so that they would have something to eat, and then they would take over the space and help me build soil by breaking down that lignin compound. So I want to show you, hopefully you can see me. I want to show you a little bit what I'm talking about. So this is a bag. It's just a plastic bag that's full of mycelium. It's full of wood sawdust. So it's full of sawdust. So it's even smaller than wood chips. And it's this, can you guys see how it's like white inside there? So this is a bag that a friend of mine who is a mushroom farmer gave me about a week or two ago, that's full of this Winecap mushroom mycelium. And this, because now I'm in a new house, I'm not in Philadelphia anymore, so I'm going to do the same exact thing here in my yard in New Jersey. I have a ton of wood chips all over the ground that I've been spreading over the past month, and I'm going to take this bag, and I have 3 bags actually of this stuff, and I'm gonna take it out of I'm gonna break it down into, like, I'm just gonna like break it into as small pieces as I possibly can, and then I'm gonna spread it all over the wood chips, and then I'm gonna rake the wood chips so that it gets all spread out and covered, and then I'm gonna water the wood chips so that this mycelium has a lot of moisture, because it needs a lot of moisture in addition to the wood chips. And then I'm gonna make sure that it stays moist for the next month or so, and I'm gonna keep checking over time, and I'm going to show you a picture of a little bit of what this is going to look like in the future. So what happens over time when you use wood chips to grow Stropharia mushrooms is that they take over. So this is like someone who has dug down in their soil. This is not a picture I took. This is someone else. So there's this soil down here, and then there's this layer down here. All of this stuff that looks like roots, most of that is actually the mycelium. And then the mushroom grows out of the soil because all of that mycelium takes over the wood chips, eats the wood chips, and then has enough energy and the right conditions to put out mushrooms. I think there's something in the chat here. So do people know what some of the conditions are that mushrooms need in order to, that this mycelium needs in order to come out of the ground? Jaden.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, they need wet soil, very moist, wet. So it's moist, wet, and then it also needs shady.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wet and shady.
Yep. Okay, so moisture, shade, or partial shade. So one of the things about Winecap mushrooms that's really cool is that they can tolerate a little bit more sunlight. In a garden that has lots of sunlight throughout the day, they will be able to survive if they have good companion plants. So something, I'll talk a little bit about companion plants, or someone else can talk to me about that. Does anybody else have any thoughts about what mushrooms need in order to fruit? All right, so when I'm talking about, well, how about, does anybody know what companion plants mean? Does anybody have an idea of what that might mean? Elijah.
Like it helps it grow better and like helps it spread and stuff like that.
Sure. Okay, Jaden, I think you have your hand up. Do you have an idea
Yes.
what companion plants are?
Yes, well, it would be an idea, but also what they, sorry, what they do, he is right, but I'm trying to think of like, for an example, comfrey is one. Not for mushrooms, but for trees. It's very good. It helps it grow. It gives it nutrients. That's it. I think it helps with nutrients in the soil.
So sometimes companion plants help each other by sharing nutrients. Maybe two plants do. In my experience, companion plants for Stropharia mushrooms are really good because they help to create what are called microclimates. And this is something that's really important to learn about. Microclimates are really great if you're gardening because you can learn a little bit about the spaces in your garden that are different than others because of like maybe one plant creates more shade than you have one tree that creates a ton of shade and the rest of your whole yard is full sun. So a microclimate in your garden would be a shady area to plant shade-loving plants under that particular tree. So that's like a microclimate within the larger climate that we live in. We live in, we have a climate in the places that we live, the states that we live in have like particular ways that they are. But there are certain smaller areas in our individual little homes, some places that are cooler, some places that are wetter, some places that are more humid or more shady or more sunny. And when we play around with those in our gardens, we can usually plant a lot more things and have better conditions for certain types of food or plants or mushrooms that we want to have. So companion plants help to act as microclimates for Winecap mushrooms. And that's a good question. Liv asked, are there health benefits? What recipes can you make with it? And is there a way to identify it in the wild? So another thing about this mushroom, I had a feeling that we were probably going to take more than one lesson to talk about this because mushrooms are so different than plants. I want to be able to start to keep talking about this mushroom and talking about mushrooms in general. I want to do that tomorrow also. So I might not be able to finish in our time. We have about like 6 minutes left today. but we'll finish and do more of this tomorrow. So I want to show you a picture. This is like not the greatest photo, but I want to show you an example of a companion plant. Jaden mentioned comfrey, which is a great one for this. It actually is a great companion plant for the Winecap, but that's because comfrey has such big leaves. So this is just this is not a particularly wonderful companion plant. This is red clover that's growing next to some Stropharia in my old garden. But one of the things that I learned, you can see like here, the soil is pretty wet. And it's usually they grow in my area in like New Jersey and Philadelphia. They usually come out of the ground, these mushrooms come out of the ground in like May and September. So when it's warm but not super hot and in a time of the year where we get a pretty decent amount of rain, they like a particular temperature range and they like a particular humidity level. And then in the summertime when it's super, super hot, and in the winter when it's too cold, the mycelium is just, it's alive, but it's just kind of dormant. It just isn't really growing very much. And then it grows like crazy when it starts to get a little bit warmer in the spring and a little bit cooler in the fall. Some things about, well, I guess health benefits I kind of want to talk about tomorrow, because there are some things that I could probably show you. There are health benefits that lots of mushrooms all have, pretty much. Lots of like similarities between various mushrooms that we can eat and various mushrooms that we can make medicine with. So I want to talk about those in a little bit more detail and in a more general way tomorrow. But recipes that you can make with Stropharia, what I usually do is I just saute these mushrooms in butter or olive oil, or a little bit of vegetable broth, just to keep them in a saute pan on the stove, and then garlic and salt and pepper. They're really delicious, kind of just on their own, very simple, with an oil or a vegetable broth as a base. And you just kind of keep them in the pan, let their water content steam off a little bit, and then they get a little bit kind of brown, they get seared a little bit brown on the bottom. That's usually what I do. And then I'll like add them into a stir fry, or you could also dehydrate it. So if you get a ton of them, in kind of like you would dehydrate other herbs or fruits or things like that, you could slice these mushrooms into thin slices and dehydrate them and save them for later. And then you could rehydrate them at a time of the year where you're ready to eat them, and they will you just put them in water or in vegetable broth, or some sort of bone broth or something, and they'll gain back they'll gain back their water content. You can put them in soup or something like that. And the other question, is there a way to identify them in the wild? Yeah, so they are technically native in where I live. So in New Jersey and western New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania, they are native here. So the ones that I grow in my garden are actually clones, they're exactly the same genetic line to a native mushroom that we found growing in the woods in Philadelphia, in Fairmount Park. So they are native, and one of the ways to identify them, I'm going to pull up, we might run out of time today to do all of the identifying stuff. But this is one of the ways that you can identify them. So their Latin name, rugosoannulata. An annulus, which is part of that word, annulata. An annulus is this ring right here. So this weird looking like white thing here, Here's an annulus, it's like falling off. Here's an annulus that's still wrapped around. Here's an annulus here. It's a particular ring that is attached to the underside of the mushroom that when it opens up, when its cap opens up here, the annulus detaches from the underside of the mushroom. And then it eventually will just fall off. So that's something that is pretty unique to this particular mushroom. So if you find a rather large mushroom with this wine-colored cap and this annulus, and then you can see this underside here, it has these gills that are attached to the stem, and they, when they open up, the gills go from looking white to looking a little bit more like grayish purple, and that's because the last thing I'm going to talk about today, but I'm going to start with again tomorrow, is talking about spores and spore print. So this is a picture that I'm going to start with tomorrow about, we're going to talk about spore prints tomorrow. But this is a picture of a Stropharia mushroom cap that's been detached from its stem and laid down on this piece of paper so that it could make a spore print. So this here is a spore print, and the spores of this mushroom are like black. They're like dark gray, purple, black color. And you can actually use a microscope, which most people don't have, but microscopes are super cool, to look at the spores under a microscope. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that tomorrow. And we're going to probably run out of time. So I'm going to see you all tomorrow. Remember your questions, and we will do more Stropharia and mushroom stuff tomorrow. And I hope you have a really great day. Maybe we can, it might cut us off, but if somebody has one more thing to say, we might have some more time. I think Elijah had his hand up first. Elijah, yeah.
Today, me and my mom, we're gonna eat. We introduced me. We're gonna try out. It's buffet